Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic: false prophets and propaganda puppeteers. That's what we're talking about today. This past Monday was Martin Luther King Day, and while many were celebrating MLK and all of his quote unquote accomplishments, we were drafting a response for social media that spoke to our true feelings about this day, because there's so much surrounding MLK, and I don't think we are being completely honest when we start talking about what's going on with him. So my husband came up with this response. He said, recent revelations show that today's celebration should be less about an individual and more about the enduring ideal of America. When citizens of every race and background come together, placing country before self, we truly progress towards a more perfect union rooted in liberty, freedom, and personal responsibility. That's what we decided to say. That's what we felt spoke to our personal beliefs surrounding MLK. And we felt like that was the best explanation of our heart regarding this matter. Because you see, MLK is one of the many bad actors who claim that their path was set with good intentions, and that may have been so. However, somewhere along the journey, they decided that they wanted to take a different path, one that lifted himself up almost to a point of a deity status in the Black community, while the Black community itself was left in shambles. But he isn't the only leader that I am questioning and I'm side-eyeing these days, because throughout history, we've seen a lot of bad actors and dangerous dictators who have risen and have been defeated. And it happens every couple of decades. We find ourselves living during this time of deep struggle. But how did we get here? You see, living under evil leaders like Mao Zedong or Hitler or Kim Jong-un doesn't just happen. There's a slow drip of chaos that begins, and it often depends on the people's willingness to do what is necessary on the front end that determines what will happen and how we will be fighting on the back end. So today, we're going to examine a portion of that slow drip that is glaringly obvious once you see it, but dangerously hidden if you are under their spell. This is a topic that has profound implications for our understanding of politics in society, and the use of false prophets and propaganda artists to manipulate public opinion. You see, throughout history, there has been these subtle yet clever figures who have shaped the narrative, often leading us down these paths that benefit a select few. But for some reason, we always see the propaganda, and in many cases are affected by the messaging, but we have no idea who was behind the messaging. Who started all of this? For example, let's take a trip back to the early 20th century. So picture this. Crisco hits the market, made from hydrogenated vegetable oil, during a time where lard was ruled in the American kitchen. Lard was the go-to for cooking and baking, and everyone was using it. But then as health awareness started to grow and people started to begin to wonder about eating animal fat and whether animal fat really was the best choice, and you have to ask yourself, where did that question come from? Why did people start questioning something that they've been doing for decades, centuries almost? So how did Crisco step in? Well, here's the deal. So the company launched an innovative propaganda campaign, pushing the idea that vegetable oil was the way to go. They weren't just selling the product, they were promoting it as this new way of life that was focused on health and the trendiness of this. They were modernizing the cooking method in kitchens. Their ads showcase happy families cooking up delicious meals with Crisco, which elevated it from just being a large substitute, but to a symbol of healthier lifestyle. But that's not all. The Crisco team teamed up with some big names, some nutritionists, some home economists. They began singing their praises, and they began pushing this as these experts went on about Crisco's purity and its versatility, and urging housewives to ditch lard and start picking up Crisco next time they went to the grocery store. And soon, cooking shows and recipe books started flooding the scene and featuring Crisco in everything from frying to baking. Then guess what? The campaign worked its wonders. It was extremely persuasive, and it used persuasive marketing techniques. Crisco didn't just increase in market shares, it completely changed how we look at fats and how fats are viewed even to today. And through savvy advertising and expert endorsements and the focus on this modern living and this new way of living, Crisco positioned itself as the game changer in the kitchen. So now I bet you're wondering, whatever happened to Crisco? Why is Crisco not there? If it was the healthier option, why aren't people still using it to today? Well, as health research advanced, it became very clear that a hydrogenated process used to create Crisco led to the formation of trans fat, which was linked to health problems, including heart disease. So while Crisco promoted itself as a healthier option, its actual health implications did not align with the initial claims. Many of these studies that were conducted in later years revealed that animal fats like lard and beef tallow are not as detrimental to our health as once believed, especially when it's consumed in moderation. In contrast, the high levels of trans fat that you find in these hydrogenated oils, such as Crisco, raise a lot of health concerns. So critics argued that the marketing tactics that were used by Crisco was misleading, but more importantly, they didn't even provide medical proof. So they were telling people that these claims that they were asserting were great, and they were coming from these medical experts and all these nutritionists, but they never provided proof of it. And this lack of transparency is extremely concerning, and its potentially risk associated with their product was never, ever shared. And it led to this growing distrust amongst consumers as they began to become more aware of the nutritional science. While Crisco positioned itself as a revolutionary, healthier alternative to lard, later research revealed that these medical claims that were made during this marketing were largely unfounded. That led to a reevaluation of everything that they were saying and all their perceived health benefits. So throughout this show, I'm going to share a few stories, some of marketing, some political propaganda, that's going to shock you, because now we see the adverse effects of all of this. But what about the propaganda that's going on now? How do we spot the real from the fake? How do we know what's real information and what's misinformation? And how do we protect ourselves from being duped? Well, we're going to dive into it, and we're going to discuss all of this after the break. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is false prophets and propaganda puppeteers. Now, before the break, I opened up about my thoughts around MLK and how hard it was to come up with a response to MLK Day, knowing what we know about the man, about the person behind all of that magnificent messaging that he put forward that ultimately, in my opinion, didn't lead to anything that was positive. The Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act was going to be passed with or without Martin Luther King because we were seeing changes that were coming down the pipeline anyway. And we didn't need a Marxist approach to policy in order to help uplift the Black community. Ultimately, it caused damage and it harmed the Black community. So now we have a bunch of people who think that they're entitled, that they are owed something. And a lot of that was a result of Martin Luther King and all the other Marxist leaders that came out of that era. We also talked about the smear campaign that was ran by Crisco on lard. But here's another one. As we continue this conversation about propaganda puppeteers, let's talk about Rockefeller and what John D. Rockefeller has to do with the food pyramid. Now, see, we all know John D. Rockefeller as the oil magnate. But he didn't just focus his business empire on oil. He also believed in philanthropy, and he explained and he examined public health. So in the early 20th century, as America was going through this transformation process, we were entering into the industrial revolution and industrial era, Rockefeller's interests expanded into the field of medicine and agriculture. And he helped to establish the Rockefeller Foundation, which aimed to improve health and nutrition, so they say. Now, the Rockefeller's Foundation funded research that led to advancements in agricultural practices and food production. This initiative was crucial in addressing food scarcity during a time when America was rapidly industrializing. However, the foundation's influence grew so that its role in shaping dietary guidelines became massive. And if we fast forward to the 1970s, we see that nutritionists and health experts began to realize that there was a need to visualize the guide to help Americans understand healthy eating. And this is where the connection deepens, because the government started developing these dietary recommendations, and a lot of these recommendations was based on the research that was outlined with foods that were essential to a balanced diet. Now, that balanced diet came from a lot of the research that was done through the Rockefeller Foundation. And what we found is that the Rockefeller Foundation funded initiatives that promoted grains, particularly breads and cereal, as an essential dietary staple. So much so that the old pyramid, before RFK had to come in and flip it upside down, but the old pyramid had us eating a lot of grains and cereals, so keep that in mind. You see, a lot of the companies Rockefeller had financially invested in emphasized efficiency and mass production, portraying these processed products as healthier alternatives to whole and natural foods. This approach allowed marketeers to repackage or rebrand products, often masking them and masking the facts that are associated with them, and many were stripped of their nutritional value through processing. So they were telling you that it was healthy, but in fact, it was being processed it was sent through a process that stripped all of its nutritional value. And these companies not only marketed their items for breakfast, but they also positioned them as quick and convenient solutions for busy families. So in 1992, the food pyramid was introduced, fundamentally influenced by early research supported by Rockefeller's philanthropic endeavors. And the pyramid structure helped simplify dietary guidelines by showing how to balance various food groups. And that was the whole point of the food pyramid. But what did they do? They emphasized grains at the base, followed by fruits, vegetables, proteins, and fats at the top. And if you noticed, the design aimed to promote healthy eating. However, the guidelines also had portion sizes, encouraging you to eat a variety of different foods, but in different portions, placing grains such as breads and cereals at the base, thus encouraging heavier portions of grains and breads and carbs over fruits and vegetables. So what was the result? Well, many of us shifted towards processed breads and cereals, often loaded with sugars and additives, overshadowing more wholesome options. And there are a lot of critics who are arguing that these marketing strategies that were employed during this time blurred the lines between what are healthy options and what is marketing hype. And as a result, American diets shifted significantly towards processed foods, often contributing to health issues such as obesity and diabetes and heart disease. While Rockefeller's influence in improving agricultural practices, quote unquote, in public health is undeniable, meaning he certainly spent a lot of money towards trying to help push public health, his role in promoting processed breads and cereals is illuminated and is way more controversial. So what does Crisco and the misguided food pyramid and Rockefeller, which thank God RFK and the Trump administration has addressed, but what does all of this have in common? Nothing would have been possible without a few puppeteers to help pull the strings. Oftentimes you look at these leaders, you look at these brands, and you have no idea why they're in your pantry, why you're following them, why you think that they're great, or why you hate them. And it has a lot to do with the puppeteers that's surrounding us. So let's start with the man behind the Crisco switcheroo. Mr. William H. Lever is one of them, but it's really the Lever brothers. But William H. Lever, while many remember him as a pioneer for modern marketing, his methods are not without controversy, as we know. The Lever brothers was all about promoting mass-produced food products. That was their mission. And while they weren't the brains behind the actual product of Crisco, their influence cast a long shadow because they prioritized profits over health by pushing these processed fats that lacked any nutritional integrity as a traditional option. Crisco's advertising manager, D.E. O'Connell, was on the forefront of the campaign that didn't just promote Crisco, but it attacked the reputation of lard. And you see, O'Connell is the one who crafted the messages that played into the fears and insecurities, claiming that vegetable fats were superior while conveniently omitting the dangers of hydrogenated oils and trans fat. This manipulation of public perception paved the way for widespread acceptance of a product that ultimately led to health issues. Then we have the J. Walter Thompson Agency, which also was a key player in the Crisco marketing machine. They understood that there was a lot of power in persuasion and in crafting ads that turned cooking with Crisco into something that was more of a fashionable trend. Almost like cooking with lard was something that your grandma did, but you're a modern woman now, so you cook with Crisco. And this tactic that is being used is still being used today on our young people like never before. Think about the rise of the Lulu dolls, or what do you call those? Like the Labubu dolls. Think about the craze, the young people who are standing in line trying to grab a gold Starbucks Bear cup. And let's not forget this Ralph Lauren holiday trend that everybody was doing, which was simply a twist on the classic Christmas decorations that's now coming back on display. But behind all of those enticing visuals was calculated efforts to rewrite how families view their food choices. So they positioned Crisco as a healthier option without full disclosure of all of its potential health risk. They sold you a bag of goods that wasn't good. And this campaign didn't just reshape our cooking habits, but it contributed to a cultural shift that prioritized convenience over nutrition. I'd rather have something quick, fast, and easy than something that's healthy. and has led to many Americans to embrace this processed food that we're frankly looking at right now as extremely detrimental to our health. Cancers that were typically relative to older people are now being seen more so in young people. It has a lot to do with us eating bad fats, too much sugar, too many processed foods. And to this day, I hear people trying to explain to me how factory-made oils are healthier than animal products. It's quite fascinating, but it's still happening. So while the stories of William H. Lever and D.E. Connell and the J. Walter Thompson Agency often evoke admiration of their based on their creativity and all of their innovation, and people are like, this is so interesting how they were able to do that, and it's still going on today. People are still arguing with their messaging today. We have to acknowledge that there are darker implications to their strategies. That they weren't just selling a product, but they were selling a new standard of eating that everyone bought into. And then you have Harvey Wiley. He's known primarily as a chemist, and he's an early advocate for food safety. But Wiley's role in promoting grains and processed foods is often overlooked too. Yeah, he pushed for better agricultural practices, but he was also a significant proponent in the mass production of grains that serve the interests of big businesses, particularly Rockefeller. So Wiley's relationship with Rockefeller and his philanthropic endeavors raised several questions about his motivations. And with financial backing, Wiley supported initiatives that positioned processed foods as healthier dietary choices. But in doing so, he ignored, once again, the potential dangers of these products, which often contained harmful additives and deficiencies due to heavy processing, as we mentioned earlier. Then we have advertising agencies, which played a crucial role in shaping consumer perceptions on grain products. Similar to the marketing strategies of Crisco, a lot of these firms that were working with Rockefeller trying to push these grains utilized some of those similar techniques to promote breakfast cereals and processed grains. They created these catchy slogans, vibrant advertisements that made these products seem almost essential, cozying up to the family life while hiding the truth about their lack of nutritional value. These ads condition consumers to adopt processed cereals as mainstays in their diets, often at the expense of whole grains and natural grains that were far healthier. And all this slick marketing was used to disguise the reality of what consumers were really putting on their breakfast tables and in their mouths. Products that was laden with sugars, additives, and stripped of its essential nutrients. Ultimately, Harvey Wiley and the advertising firms weren't just shaping the grain industry. They were influencing public health in a way that benefited the powerful interests of figures like Rockefeller. He made a lot of money off of people eating breads and cereals. Didn't necessarily help people, though. Their campaigns created a culture where convenience outweighed health once again. So, as you can see, these propagandas are in disguise. And while they have influenced us all in some way, and if you say you haven't been, that's not true. We all have been influenced into eating something or doing something because propaganda and trends have pushed us in that direction. And the fact that many of these tactics, such as the vibrant colors, the commercials that include the housewife serving food to their family, although it's unhealthy, a lot of this stuff is still in rotation today, and it's still working on the psyche of so many as we speak. But what happens when these false prophets and these propaganda puppeteers and all their false advertisements, what happens when it begins to shape politics? Well, we get leaders like Mao Zedong and Hitler, to name the obvious. However, Many people don't know who Joseph Goebbels is or Lucy. These are the key architects around the messaging that led to the rise of Hitler and Mao Zedong. And let's talk about them. One of the key architects of propaganda was Joseph Goebbels. I don't know if I may not be pronouncing that correctly, so I'm going to spell it. His last name is Goebbels. He served as Hitler's minister of propaganda, and Joseph understood the importance of controlling the narrative. In order to gain popular support, they needed a cohesive and compelling message that resonated with that to sway perceptions among different communities like the Jewish community. So Nazis crafted messages built around themes of nationalism, unity, and strength. Sound familiar? Because we're hearing those same words now. They presented Hitler as a savior of Germany, someone who could restore the nation to its former glory after all of the economic difficulties that were currently surrounding World War I. They painted him as a caring and compassionate leader. And this narrative was amplified through rallies, through speeches, and through various forms of media. And I remember a Jewish man telling me that there were Jewish bus drivers who were clueless to what the real plan was, obviously, but they were actually assisting by passing out pamphlets to bus riders to help push some of the messaging of Hitler. Completely oblivious to where his heart was, but assuming he had good intentions. You see, Germany was facing significant hardship during this time. It was hyperinflation, mass unemployment, and it left many of the citizens desperate for change. They were looking for somebody. And Hitler promised a restoration of the economy. He enticed them with all of these different economic growth opportunities that he issued to segments of the population, including the Jewish community. This vision of stability and improvement. And see, the Nazis were pushing a vision of a unified Germany, promoting pride in German identity and culture. And for many of the Jews who were successfully integrated into society, this message might have been momentarily alluring, despite the underlying tensions brewing within the Nazi ideology. I'm sure they questioned some of it, but a lot of people still felt like, maybe we can all work together. Does that sound familiar? Some of the propaganda highlighted positive contributions of Jews to German culture and society. And although this was limited to the overshadowing by rampant anti-Semitism, it was portrayed as an attempt to create a narrative of cooperation, suggesting that there should be an alignment with Nazi ideals and that might lead to some type of mutual benefit for everybody. That's what people were thinking during the time that Hitler was on the rise. There weren't any concentration camps at this point. The Holocaust had not occurred. It was all messaging. And ultimately, after so many had already bought into this message, Hitler's speeches were meticulously designed to evoke these strong emotions of fear and pride and hope. And he often scapegoated the Jewish community by portraying them as a source of German troubles. This appeal to the emotions of people was strategic by creating an us versus them mentality. He sought to unify non-Jewish Germans while inciting distrust towards Jews. Sounds familiar? The regime produced propaganda that depicted Jews in dehumanizing ways, reinforcing harmful stereotypes. And this messaging aimed to make the Jewish community a convenient target for societal frustrations. Everything that's happening is because of MAGA. Because of the Jews. Let's get back. Let's get back to Hitler. Wait. But all of this is just sounding way too familiar. The objective was to rally support by diverting blame away from the government and redirecting it towards Jews. And through relentless propaganda, the Nazis managed to marginalize and cast suspicion on the Jewish population, which played a tragic role in building a public compliance for increasingly oppressive policies. The widespread messaging opened the door and it facilitated an acceptance of discriminatory laws. And it ultimately led to the horrors of the Holocaust. But as you see, it didn't just start at concentration camps.
From their rise to power to the murder of 6 million European Jews in the Holocaust, the Nazis relied on a powerful weapon: propaganda. Propaganda is biased information designed to shape public opinion and behavior. Adolf Hitler and other Nazi leaders were skilled propagandists who used many techniques to spread their messages. The Nazis relied upon propaganda to create a society where only Germans they considered racially pure belonged. Jews and other groups were excluded. After Hitler became chancellor in 1933, the Nazis started to take control of the media. They shut down independent newspapers and seized authority over radio, film, newsreels, theater, and music productions. Soon, the Nazis controlled almost all media accessible to the German population and used this power to spread propaganda in different ways. They utilized symbols, like the swastika, to promote political allegiance, nationalism, and Nazi ideology. Hitler designed the Nazi flag in 1920 and transformed it into the trademark of the Nazi Party. It became a part of everyday life and a potent political tool. They used slogans that simplified their messages to just a few memorable words or phrases, like calling Jews the scourge of humanity, or recruiting children to join the Hitler Youth. The Nazis updated their propaganda strategies to improve effectiveness and appeal to a wider range of people. Beginning in the 1920s, radio emerged as a worldwide sensation. For the first time, people could listen to news and entertainment in their homes. The Nazis quickly recognized the power of this new medium. They commissioned a low-cost radio called the People's Receiver, allowing millions more Germans to buy radios and listen from their own homes. Under Nazi rule, all German films would become subject to censorship and control. They produced films to demonize Jews by comparing them to rats and drawing on other negative stereotypes, while also portraying the supposedly ideal pure German. The Nazis used all of these propaganda techniques to exclude, demonize, and isolate Jewish people. They showed the world how dangerous propaganda could be in the hands of experts.
It started with unity, or at least the message of unity. And I wish we were out of the weeds. I wish we didn't have to talk about anybody else, but we've got to talk about another propaganda puppeteer. And that's Mao Zedong's marketing strategist. You see, Mao Zedong is the founding father of the People's Republic of China. China wasn't always a communist country, but it is today, and it remains today, largely because of key figures who are part of the marketing strategy that Mao Zedong put in place. And his name was Liuzi. Liuzi. We're going to call him Liuzi for the sake of my American accent. But he was an essential architect to Mao's propaganda machine. He put it all together. He structured it. Because Mao Zedong understood the importance of mass communication and the importance of solidifying his power. And he knew he couldn't do that if he didn't have effective propaganda that was crafted and that crafted his image as a revolutionary leader who was sent here to promote communist ideology across the nation. And these efforts were supported by this marketing strategist who helped to design an extensive propaganda campaign that resonated deeply with the Chinese populace. You see, Luzi's work involved creating engaging and emotive propaganda that celebrated Mao's victories and painted a bright future under his leadership. From protesters glorifying the Communist Party to pamphlets promoting the Great Leap Forward, the messaging often utilized simple language and powerful imagery to reach the masses, making complex ideas more accessible. People felt like they had a better understanding. The propaganda that was centered around key themes such as unity, there's that word again, strength, and progress. All of these words that we're continuing to hear today. It's the same old playbook. Mao was portrayed as the people's champion, who was sent there to fight against imperialism and to advocate for the common man. And this messaging was vital in mobilizing support during critical campaigns like the Cultural Revolution, where loyalty to Mao was equated to patriotism. Mao's speeches were meticulously crafted as well, and they were aimed at stirring up emotions once again and inciting fervor among its followers. Luizi and his team encouraged that these messages were repeatedly disseminated through various media platforms such as newspapers, radio broadcasts, public rallies, just all to reinforce Mao's cult of personality. The propaganda that was crafted by Luizi and others helped control the narrative, presenting a carefully curated version of reality that served Mao's interests. While Mao Zedong was able to rally support for his vision, the price was a deeply polarized society and immense suffering that continues to this day. But everyone looks at Mao. But as you can see here, there's so much more at play when you see these leaders. And having worked behind the scenes in Georgia politics, I often have assisted people with their messaging. And I just know that it can get really dark. I've heard people come up with stuff and I'm like, I don't even think that's close to being true. It sounds true. But no, we can't use that because it isn't true. But I believe that there is one way. And there's only one way that we can find ourselves in a position where we are not on the stake of propaganda, where we are not being thrown every which way through propaganda. And I'm going to share what I believe that one thing is right after the break. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We're almost done, so don't leave the table. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic are false prophets and propaganda puppeteers. Before the break, we talked about some very difficult topics, many of which may still be weighing on your heart today. And I hope you're going to your pantry and you're thinking, why do I eat this? Why am I eating this food? Have I been propagandized? And I hope you're listening to political leaders with a different ear, with a new, fresh set of eyes. But now I want to address the role that we must all play in ensuring that we are not easily persuaded by propaganda. And as I stated before the break, I have one way, and this is in my opinion, but one way that I believe we can beat the effects of propaganda, because it isn't unavoidable. We will all run into propaganda. So listen up. I think it's time that we all have a wake-up call. because we are living in a world that is swarming with propaganda, from political leaders to food advertisers to all kinds of other product marketing. There's a constant message that's trying to manipulate our thoughts and our decisions. And here's the harsh truth. The only way that we're able to avoid it and not be played by these powerful forces is if we stay firmly in the driver's seats of our own lives. Think about it. When we start looking at someone else to deliver us, to a leader or a savior that's not Jesus Christ, or even a nutritionist, we hand over our personal responsibility. We willingly give up our power to think critically and to make informed choices. The moment we start deferring to others, we start losing control over our own lives and our own decisions. And it's really easy to fall into this trap because we get caught up with everything that's happening in our daily lives. And we find ourselves in this trap of believing that someone else has all the answers and that we can just look to them. But when we do that, we become vulnerable to manipulation, and leaders and advertisers thrive on our complacency. They want us to believe that they'll take care of us, that we don't need to make decisions for ourselves, that they can do it. But in reality, they often profit from our reliance on them. We got to stand up and reclaim our autonomy. It's time to trust our own experiences and insights. Because in a world where AI is becoming the norm, and we're flipping through social media and it's harder and harder to tell what's real and what's fake, it's now easier more than ever to run game on everyone. Because our lives are shaped by our choices. And those choices come from understanding our needs, not from blindly following someone else's agenda. Only we know what works for us, what nourishes us physically, mentally, and emotionally. Don't let the noise of the world drown out your own voice, so much so that you're not staying informed or critically evaluating the messages that you're encountering. Engage with your own experiences, learn from them, and adapt as needed. This is how we keep the power in our hands rather than handing it over to those who seek to exploit us for their own benefit. Let's not forget that the road of personal responsibility is a bumpy one, and it requires effort, but it's also extremely rewarding. And by actively participating in your own life, we strip away the power of propaganda. So I urge you, stay in the driver's seat. Embrace your journey. Challenge the narratives that don't seem right. And don't let the voices of others drown you out, so much so that it drowns out your own voice. Because this is your life. You got to own it. You got to live it. And you should never let anyone else take the wheel. As I always say, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.